Why should we be concerned about GM foods? I'm sure we've all heard from industry, regulators, governments even, that actually GM foods are the most thoroughly tested foods ever produced in human history, and that they have been passed as safe, and that we should consume them with no fear of harm. Is that true or not? Well, first of all, I would like to consider genetic modification, GM, as a technology. The first thing we need to realize about GM is that it is a purely artificial technology for producing a new crop variety. The fact that it's artificial, of course, doesn't automatically make it unsafe. It's the consequences of the GM transformation process that gives us cause for concern. And by us, I mean scientists like myself around the world. The key points to recognize about the GM transformation process is that it, as summarized on this slide, is that it allows the transfer of genes between totally unrelated organisms. Normally, transfer of genetic material is between related organisms. Strawberries with strawberries, potatoes with potatoes, or wheat with wheat. But with GM, you can transfer genes into a crop from any organism that you like. Bacteria, viruses, unrelated plants, animals, and so forth. So it crosses species barriers, allows gene transfer across species barriers. And as a result, it produces combinations of genes that have never evolved to work together in a harmonious, integrated manner. Now, this is a very, very important point, so I'm just going to spend a few minutes on that. At the time when GM crops were first conceived and started to be developed in the early 1980s, our understanding of gene organization and function was very, very rudimentary. And genes were considered as isolated units of information. And as a result, they could be transferred between species as a result with total predictability. I'm afraid that is simply not the case. We now know gene organization in DNA not to be random, and that no gene works in isolation. Genes function as part of integrated wholes within a given organism, within a given context. And that therefore, when you take a gene from one organism and randomly insert it into the DNA of a totally unrelated organism, you're placing a gene in an environment where it has not evolved to work in an integrated manner with the surrounding genes in that organism. As a result of that, GM brings with it an inherent unpredictable component in terms of gene function. In addition to that, the GM transformation process as a whole is highly mutagenic. What I mean by that, it produces damage in the DNA throughout the genome, the totality of the DNA of the plant. So what we have is a situation where the combination of effects from the GM transformation process, the combinations of novel genes that normally would not come together, plus the general disruptive effect, the mutagenic effect of the GM transformation process, combine to always, to a lesser or greater degree, disrupt the biochemistry of the protein and biochemistry of the plant. And if you disturb that, you run the risks of producing new toxins and new allergens and a disturbed altered nutritional value in the food. These are proven. There is evidence to show this disruptive effect. This is measured. This disruptive effect of the GM transformation process is a measured phenomenon. And as a result, for me, this is why we need to thoroughly, generically evaluate GM foods, especially for chronic, both acute and especially chronic long-term toxicity effects.